The certified letter sat on my kitchen counter for 2 hours before I worked up the nerve to open it, and when I finally did, the spoon I'd been holding clattered into the sink. It was from First Meridian Bank. My name printed at the top, my address, my social security number partially masked. Below that, a notice of delinquency on a personal line of credit I had never opened. $61,000. The payment was 43 days past due, and the most recent charge, the one that made the air go thin in my lungs, was a deposit to a place called Halcyon Ridge Estate. I knew that name. Everyone in our family knew that name. It was where my younger sister was getting married in 5 weeks. I read the letter 4 times. I kept thinking I'd misunderstood, that my eyes were skipping a word, that there was some explanation hiding in the fine print. But the numbers didn't move. The signature authorizing the credit line was at the bottom of a scanned attachment, and even on my phone screen I could see it wasn't mine. Close, though. Disturbingly close. Whoever copied my signature had practiced. The capital letters were right, the little tail I put on the last letter was right. But I crossed my sevens, always have since high school, and the date on the application had a plain 7. Such a small thing. Such an enormous, small thing. I sat down on the kitchen floor because my legs decided that for me. My name is the one everyone in my family reaches for when something needs paying. I'm 31. I'm a surgical scheduling coordinator at a hospital downtown, which sounds more glamorous than it is. I spend my days fitting human beings into time slots and apologizing to people in pain. It's steady work. I'm careful with money in the way people get careful when they grew up watching the lights flicker off because a bill came due. I have a good credit score. I've always had a good credit score. And apparently that score, the thing I'd protected like a small flame cupped in my hands for a decade, had become something my family considered communal property. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest. I loved them. That's what made it take so long. If you've never had to learn that love and safety are 2 different things, this part won't make sense to you. But if you have, you already know exactly where I'm sitting on that kitchen floor, and you know I stayed there a while. Let me back up. 3 months before the letter came, we'd had a dinner at my parents' house. My sister had just gotten engaged, and she was floating around the dining room showing everyone the ring like she was conducting an orchestra. My mother kept refilling water glasses nobody had emptied, the way she does when she's working up to asking for something. My father sat at the head of the table and waited until dessert. "We've been talking," he said, which is a sentence that has cost me money my entire adult life. Your sister deserves a real wedding, not a backyard thing, something the family can be proud of. I said that sounded nice. I meant it even. I wanted her to have a good day. Halcyon Ridge does the full package, my mother said. It's expensive, but you only do this once. She let that sit. Then, lighter, like she was suggesting we split an appetizer, we thought since you're doing so well, you might want to be the one to make it happen for her. The table went quiet in a way that was not actually quiet. I could feel everyone arranging their faces. "I can't do that," I said. My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "I'm still paying down my student loans. I don't have $60,000. My father set his fork down. Nobody said 60,000. Whatever it costs. I don't have it, after everything we've done for you." My mother said it gently, which was worse. "We raised you. We kept a roof over your head when your father was between jobs. Family takes care of family. That's not a burden, that's a blessing." My sister looked at me with her eyes already wet, the way she's been doing since she was 4 and wanted my dessert. "I just thought you'd be happy for me," she said. I went home that night feeling like the villain in a story I hadn't agreed to be in. I told myself I'd held my ground. I'd said no. I actually believed that mattered. What I didn't know, what I learned that night sitting on the floor with the certified letter, was that my no had never been part of their plan. It was a formality they were waiting to route around. I did not cry on that floor. I want you to know that because the old version of me would have. The old version of me would have called my mother in tears asking what I'd done wrong. Instead, something cold and clear moved through me, and I stood up, and I got my laptop, and I started pulling records. Here is the thing about being the responsible one. You keep documents. You save emails. You screenshot things. I've been doing it for years without knowing why. the way an animal stockpiles food before a winter it can't name. By 2 in the morning, I had a folder on my desktop and I had a spreadsheet. And the spreadsheet scared me more than the letter had, because it wasn't just the wedding. There was the $1,100 I'd lent my sister for car repairs 4 years ago, repaid in a single text that said, "Love you, sis, you're the best." There was the time my father needed $2,000 to cover a short month, and I transferred it and he'd never mentioned it again. There was the credit card my mother had borrowed, just for the grocery run during a tight stretch, which had come back to me 3 weeks later with a charge from a department store I never shopped at. Small things, individually, I'd absorbed every one of them the way you absorb a bruise, telling myself it was nothing, it didn't hurt that much, it was family. I added it up. $19,000 over 6 years, not counting the forged loan. $19,000 I had handed over with a smile, plus $61,000 they'd simply taken in the dark. And then I found the email chain. It was buried in an old thread, one I'd been CC'd on by accident months earlier and never read because the subject line was just "Thanks." My mother had written to my sister, with my father copied, "Don't worry about the deposit. She'll come around like she always does. And if she doesn't, we'll handle it. She has the credit for it and she'd never make a scene. You know how she is. You know how she is." I read that line so many times the words stopped being words. They'd written me down. They'd reduced 31 years of me into a sentence, and the sentence was, she'd never make a scene. A reliable resource. An account they could draw on. They knew me well enough to forge me, and they liked me precisely because I was easy to forge. I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark of my apartment, and for the first time in my life, I let myself feel the full weight of what I had let happen, and underneath the hurt, there was something else. Something I almost didn't recognize because I'd kept it folded up so small for so long. Anger. Clean, useful anger. The next morning, I did not call my mother. I called the bank's fraud department, and I want to say that to anyone who's ever been where I was, because I spent years thinking the only options were pay or be hated. There's a third door. I just never let myself look at it. The fraud specialist was a tired-sounding woman named at the call center, and she walked me through it like she'd done it 1,000 times, which I suppose she had. She asked if I recognized the account. No. Did I authorize it? No. Was the signature mine? No. And I could prove it. She told me to file a report with the police. That identity theft is a crime, an actual crime, even when the thief shares your last name. And to place a freeze on my credit immediately, and to put a fraud alert on file with all 3 bureaus. People always hesitate when it's family, she said, not unkindly. I'll tell you what I tell everyone. The bank doesn't care that they love you. The bank is going to come after you for this money unless you make it official that you didn't borrow it. Loving them and protecting yourself are 2 different decisions. I wrote that down. Loving them and protecting yourself are 2 different decisions. I still have the sticky note. So I did the unthinkable thing. The thing every part of my upbringing had trained me to never do. I drove to the police station on my lunch break, and I sat across from a detective in a gray cubicle, and I told him my family had opened the line of credit in my name and forged my signature and spent $61,000 of it. He didn't blink. He'd seen it before, too. He took my statement. He took copies of the loan documents and the bank's fraud confirmation. He gave me a report number. He told me that filing it didn't mean anyone would necessarily be arrested tomorrow, but it created a record, and a record was a wall. And a wall was something they couldn't talk me out of later. That afternoon I froze my credit. I changed every password. I closed the joint emergency account my mother had insisted be kept for emergencies years ago, and that I now understood had been the conduit for half of this. I felt, with each click, less like a daughter and more like a person. And then, I made a decision that surprised even me. I didn't tell them, not yet, because here's what I'd finally understood. The moment I confronted them, they would shift into the gear they were best at. The tears, the after everything we've done for you, the calls to aunts and cousins recasting me as the cold, ungrateful one. My mother could turn a room against me in an afternoon. I'd watched her do it to my father's brother. If I called her now, in pain, looking for an apology, she would hand me guilt instead, and I would take it. Because that was the transaction we'd always run. So I stayed quiet, and I built. I want to tell you that the next part was clean and easy, but it was 3 of the hardest weeks of my life because I had to keep showing up. I went to my sister's bridal shower and held a paper plate of cake and smiled while she opened gifts I'd technically helped pay for without knowing it. My mother put her arm around me and told her friend, "This one's been so generous, you have no idea." I said nothing. I felt the wall I was building behind my own face, and I let her keep talking to it. There was a moment that nearly broke me. My grandmother, my father's mother, the one person in that family who'd ever made me feel like more than a wallet, pulled me aside near the dessert table. She's small now, soft-handed, and she held my wrist and said, "Your mother says you're paying for everything. That's a lot to put on one girl." She studied my face. "Are you all right?" I almost told her everything right there. I almost let it pour out. But my grandmother talks to my mother every Sunday, and love is not the same as discretion, and I couldn't risk it. So I said, "I'm handling it, Gran." And she squeezed my wrist and said, "You always do." And that sentence, "you always do," was the same sentence from the email, the same trap with kinder packaging, and I understood that even the people who loved me had been taught to lean on me until I bent. I went home and I cried that night finally. Not the broken crying of before, the other kind, the kind that empties a room out so you can move new furniture in. The wedding was 4 weeks away when the venue called me. A woman from Halcyon Ridge, bright and professional, calling to confirm the final payment schedule with the cardholder. With me? Because I was, as far as their records showed, the person financing the entire event. I had rehearsed this. I'd known it would come. "I need to tell you something," I said, and my voice did not shake, and I'm going to put it in writing immediately after this call so there's a record. I never opened any account with your venue. I never signed any contract. My signature was forged by a family member, and I've already filed a police report and a fraud claim with the bank. I'm letting you know directly so the venue isn't caught in the middle. There was a long pause. Then carefully, "Ma'am, we have a signed agreement on file." "You have a forged agreement on file. I'll be sending you the police report number and the bank's fraud confirmation within the hour. I'd strongly suggest you not process any further charges against that line of credit because they will be reversed, and I'd hate for you to be left holding an unpaid balance for an event you booked in good faith." I could hear her deciding to believe me. Yes. "Thank you for telling us. We'll need to contact the party who made the booking." "You should. Their name is on the application as the contact, even if my name is on the signature. I think you'll find the handwriting doesn't match my ID." I hung up and sent the email before my courage could cool. Then I sat back and understood that I'd just lit the fuse, and that there was no way to be in the room when it reached the powder, and that this was, against everything I'd been raised to feel, exactly fine. It took about 6 hours. My sister called first, then my mother, then my father, then my sister again, then a number I didn't recognize that turned out to be the wedding planner. 11 calls in an evening. I let them all go to voicemail, and I listened to each one later, sitting on my couch with a glass of wine, because the woman from the bank had told me to document everything, and because, I'll be honest, I needed to hear them realize. The early voicemails were confused. The venue called, "There's some mix-up with the account. Can you call them back and sort it out, sweetie?" They still thought I'd fix it. They still thought I was the spoon they could stir any mess with. Then they got the police report number. My mother's third voicemail was the one I saved twice. Her voice had lost all its softness. "How dare you? How dare you bring the police into a family matter? Do you have any idea what you've done? Your sister is devastated. You've humiliated all of us. After everything we have done for you, this is who you turn out to be." And then, quieter. The part she didn't know was the most damning thing she could have said. "We were going to pay it back. We're going to pay it back." Not, "We don't know what you're talking about." Not, "There's been a terrible mistake." We were going to pay it back, the whole confession sitting in my voicemail, where I could keep it forever. My father's message was shorter. "You've started something you can't stop. You think you're so much better than us now?" I'd never told him I thought I was better than them. I just didn't want to be robbed by them. It turns out, to certain people, those two things sound identical. My sisters sent texts instead of calling, a long ladder of them. You're ruining my wedding. You're ruining my life over money. It's just money. Family is supposed to help family. You're dead to me. I hope you're happy alone. I read them the way you read about weather in a city you've left. They couldn't reach me anymore. The account was frozen. The signature was disputed. The wall was built and I was standing safely on the other side of it. Here's what I did not do. I did not text back. I did not defend myself. I did not call my grandmother to explain. I did not post anything online. Even when my mother put up a status about the heartbreak of raising a child who forgets where she came from and the comments filled with sympathy from people who'd known me my whole life, I let it stand. Because I'd learned the most important thing too late to use it earlier, but right on time to use it now. You cannot win an argument with people who need you to be the villain. You can only stop showing up to play the part. What broke the narrative wasn't me. It was the truth, which has a way of leaking once you stop holding the door shut. A cousin texted me 2 days later. Wait, the venue told my mom your signature was forged. I thought you offered to pay for everything. And then another cousin, and then an aunt, the quiet one, who wrote, I always wondered why it was always you. I'm sorry, sweetheart. I should have said something years ago. That when I answered, I wrote back, thank you. It means more than you know. And it did. The wedding did not happen at Halcyon Ridge. The venue, once it had a police report in hand, canceled the booking and kept the forfeited deposit, which my parents had to scramble to cover out of their own actual money for the first time in this entire saga. My sister got married eventually, I heard, in a much smaller ceremony at a hall near my parents' church with a guest list that had been quietly trimmed from 300 to 60. I wasn't invited. I would not have gone. The fraud claim resolved in my favor. The line of credit was closed, the charges reversed, my credit slowly climbing back toward where I'd kept it all those careful years. The detective called once to tell me my parents had been spoken to, that charges were under review, and that whatever happened next, it was the prosecutor's decision and not mine to carry. I thanked him. I told him I didn't need them punished, I just needed them stopped. He said in the flat, kind way of a man who'd heard a lot of families come apart, you did the right thing. You'd be amazed how many people don't. I moved, eventually, not 3 states away dramatically, just across the city, to a 1-bedroom with a window that gets the morning light and a lock that only my key opens. I kept my job. I started seeing a therapist, a woman who in our second session said something I think about constantly. She said, you keep describing yourself as the responsible one, like it's a personality. It's not a personality. It's a job they gave a child, and you can quit. I'm quitting. It's slow. Some nights I still reach for my phone to check on my mother out of a reflex 31 years deep, and I have to remind myself that checking on her was never reciprocal. That I was the one always reaching, that the line only ever ran one direction. The first few Sundays without the call felt like missing a tooth. Now they just feel like Sundays. My grandmother found out the truth in the end. Not from me. An aunt told her. She called me, on her own phone, which she's not supposed to use without help. And she cried, and she said, I leaned on you too. All those years, I'm so ashamed. And I told her the truth, which was that she was the only one who ever asked if I was all right, and that counted for something, and that I'd come visit her, just her, on a day my mother wasn't there. We've done that twice now. We don't talk about the rest. She holds my wrist the same way and tells me I'm a good girl, and for once it doesn't feel like a leash. People ask me, the few people I've told, whether I feel guilty, whether it was worth it, whether I'd do it again knowing it cost me my mother, my father, my sister, the whole crowded, loud Thanksgiving table of my childhood. And the honest answer is that I didn't lose a family. I lost the bill for one. There's a difference. And it took me 61,000 forged dollars and 1 police report to learn it. I think about that sticky note on my fridge, the one I copied off a tired bank employee on the worst morning of my life. Loving them and protecting yourself are 2 different decisions. I used to think the second one canceled the first. I don't anymore. I think you can love people from across a wall you built to keep yourself whole. I think sometimes the wall is the only honest thing left to give them. The morning light comes through my window now and lands on nobody's debt but my own, and my own debt is small, and shrinking, and mine. I drink my coffee. My phone stays quiet. I used to be terrified of a quiet phone. I thought it meant I'd done something wrong, that someone was angry, that I needed to fix it. Now I know what a quiet phone is. It's the sound of nobody being able to take anything from you that you didn't choose to give. And some mornings, with the cup warm in my hands and the whole long day in front of me belonging to no one but me, I think that might be the most expensive thing I ever bought, and the only thing I've ever owned outright.